all of that. We're going to just go over our thoughts on the season. I'm joined just by Marcus today. So it's going to be just like a
Hey,
one-to-one chat with us. So to start off with, we've got a list of things we want to cover throughout this episode and things we want to talk about. But I want to start with just a general overall reflection of the season. So for you, Mark, when you look back on this year, I know it's not been a highlight year for Liverpool, but what's your overall thoughts on how this year has been as a fan in general?
did we beat Man United 7-0?
Oh yeah, you did.
Yeah, that's all I remember from this season. Yeah, no, like not being the greatest season, and from a Liverpool perspective, got Europa League football now next season, finished fifth, way below expectations, but hopefully, enough to indicate the changes that need to be made this summer if Liverpool want to be back, competing at the top end of the table. Man City do what Man City do. A very surprising season from Arsenal. Managing to put a title campaign together. So I have to take back what I said a while ago, which was that Arsenal wouldn't, have a title race before Newcastle. And then obviously United getting a top four finish too. Um, well played to Newcastle for finally securing that top four. I feel like it's a sad truth for all of us that Newcastle are establishing themselves among the big boys, and that's probably not going to change. The new Man City. Hopefully, there's not 115 financial irregulations with them as well in the next 5 years. But yeah, I think that then in that middle gap, there's a couple of interesting things that we'll point to with the likes of Brighton and Aston Villa and their seasons, and then obviously on the relegation side, Leeds out of the Premier League after 3 years. Southampton, awful season, probably not a team anyone would have expected to get relegated at the beginning of the year, bottom of the league. And Leicester, a team that you would have thought have enough firepower and enough quality to be staying in the Premier League. And I think there's big question marks to be had there and discussed and asked there. So I think they're things that we'll get into, but that's a bit of an overview of the season.
Yeah, it's definitely one that I will look back on with a lot of joy. There's obviously been some moments where I think it could have been a lot different. I think the way how the season petered out for Arsenal wasn't really the best. But like you said, it's been a season of lots of surprises, and seeing Newcastle now establishing themselves as the next big superpower, concerning. I'm happy for them, really am. But at the end of the day, they're just like you said, they're tracking to be the next Man City. They've been very frugal in how they've spent so far, and you can only imagine now with Champions League football that they can kind of push that out a lot harder. They're probably going to rival us for a lot of targets. So Liverpool, Arsenal, players that we're going to want to buy, they're going to be also looking to shop for as well. So it's going to be quite interesting. At the top of the table, obviously the team that I think we're going to get into a lot more, of course, is Brighton and what they've done this year. Incredible how they've just, again, you could say punched above their weight, but that's, great ownership, great scouting, great planning in terms of what they do in their recruitment and also with their managers. Now, at the bottom of the table, like you said, Leeds, Southampton dropping out. Like Leeds, and then there's news came out this week about their owner, Radzini, who tried to use Ellen Road as leverage it as a loan to invest in another club in Italy. And it's just like, what are we playing at here? Like, are you serious? Okay, yes, you might own the asset, but it's not your stadium. It belongs to the fans. Like it belongs to the community. And if that if that deal fell through, and they had to give up Ellen Road as capital, then what would happen? What would the fans do? So I thought that was disgusting, and I'm glad that people have called him out for it. I'm also glad that he's shown his real side now, so people know what kind of owner he is in his response about it's his business and to stop turning the fans against him. I'm like, no, it's not yours. It belongs to the fans, and I hope he never forgets that. And then obviously, Nottingham Forest kind of being the surprise of the season in that they had a massive turnover in the summer, the players they churned through, and then just the way how they managed to stay up. I always felt like they were a good shout going into the World Cup that they'll be okay because I just thought there was enough there and how they were playing just weren't quite getting the results. And then in January they got a couple of extra players and that just was enough to get them that push over the line. And also their owners just sticking with the manager and not firing him when it would have been easy to say, look, let's just get rid of him, start again. So that was quite promising. Right, let's do a review of our respective teams. But before we go through a Liverpool Arsenal review, because I think that'll be quite interesting, quite easy, and quite fun for us to talk about. Let's talk about our rivals and our noisy neighbours and our teams that we like to look at and laugh at. We'll start with Everton. we'll work our way up the table because we're going to go through all of them. But looking at how Everton's season has panned out, every year we always hear about the great Everton resurgence and how they're going to be, you know, there and thereabouts. They got Mashiri and they've got all this money, but it's not about having the money, it's about how you use it. And they are a prime example of a club who were rich and were stupid in their richness. How do you look at and reflect on what you've seen over the other side of Liverpool?
Yeah, it's not good, is it? I think that is the problem at Everton, that there's always so much hope at the beginning of a year. After signing, Dwight McNeil for 50 million and being like, but he's a really good player. Like he's a really, really good player. And it's like, yeah, he's not bad, but like, if you'd have signed him for 30 million or 20 million, nobody would be talking. But you're spending these big fees like on players who, are just not going to improve the club in any real way. And as I said the last time when talking about Everton, if you look at their last 4 or 5 managers that they've had, there's no structure across the board with them. You can't get an idea of what they're trying to achieve or what they're trying to do. It's almost like they just do a lottery pick on who's the best potential manager available at any given time. So like it's been a disappointing season for Everton, but again, I think just as the same as last year, staying up on the final day, they can count themselves very very lucky to be still a Premier League team, and they need to shake themselves and they need to really make some changes to get this right. They need to build a culture and an idea of how they want to move forward, a style of football that they want to play, and they need to be loyal to it. And that's the only way you're going to start to build. And you see that with some of the other teams in the middle of the table who Everton would hope to be rivaling with. They're a million miles ahead of Everton because they have structure, they have an idea, they have a philosophy, and even when they've lost big pieces of them puzzles along the way, they've filled them with like-minded individuals, like-minded players, like-minded coaches, like-minded managers that fit the bill of what they're looking at. So Everton need to look at the likes of Brighton, look at the likes of Aston Villa, and even West Ham in past seasons, and start to see what they're doing and try to model something similar, because at the moment Everton are flailing, and if they're not careful will find themselves in a situation where lightning, they say lightning doesn't strike twice, and for Everton it has, but will it strike 3 times, or will they finally be out at the end of this season, this new season coming? So yeah, I don't think it's been a great season for Everton. I think they need mass changes at Everton. But always glad to see them still as a Premier League team, and wish them the best as long as they stay, in their place, but as our, little brother.
And that's the key thing. It's like, as you said, coming into the last podcast for this, coming up to the last games of the season, it's like, we want our 6 point a season team to still be in the league, and they are still here for now. But it says a lot about them, that their decision making they made and how it's cost them. They have all this money, but then at the boardroom level, they don't really have the right people there. There's also talk that fans want some of the board to resign. I know that so I watched the last game of the season. I watched their match in particular because I was quite curious to see how they would do. And it was quite telling that all the pundits were saying, look, these guys got to move on. We need to see some substantial change, and quick. There's been no change so far, so we'll see what they think about that. But yeah, I hope they learn their lesson, because at the end of the day, like, to survive in this league, it's getting so much more competitive. The teams that have come up, I feel for some of them, because I don't know how they're going to really adapt to the league. I hope they can make it. Burnley, you'd think, with the amount of games that Company's watched this season, he would have a good idea of what to do. Is it Sheffield United? They've been here before. Obviously, a lot of change there, but they would know what it felt like to that first season, what's important. And the key thing is continuity in your style of play. Don't change too much. That's why Forest, I thought they'll be fine, because they didn't change a lot from what they played in the Championship to the Premier League. And then obviously Luton Town, it's a whole, they've not been here for a long time. So they're going to enjoy it. But you look at those three and you think Luton Town might be the one of the three that's most at risk of going down, and Everton might join them. Because you never know. Luton Town might turn around and say, "Well, look at Everton last season. We're going to take their spot now. We're going to stay up because we've seen what they need to do. We're going to actually pick the players that they should have gone for." But we'll have to just wait and see it. And yeah, Everton, you lot are idiots. Let's move up to the next rival. We'll talk about Arsenal's rival, Tiny Tots, Tottenham Hotspur FC. them lot down the lane, or as everyone's now referred to them, Beyonce's second home, because apparently she sells out that place more than you guys have done for all the years you've been there. People are saying she should just take over London Stadium and just call it Renaissance Dome and just make it her home. I'm not against that. Tottenham can move back to some other place, not Wembley. Maybe Milton Keynes, they can start playing their games there. I don't mind. But like looking at Tottenham's season for you, it's getting a little bit embarrassing. And I think now you need to kind of rethink not just where brand Tottenham fits in the global football world or where Tottenham is viewed as a club. It's clearly you're not a big club. Club managers don't want to go there. But also, structurally, what can we do differently to make sure that the plan that we have actually works? Because clearly the plan you have, which is to become a top four established team, win trophies. Win trophies, that's your plan. I know you don't achieve it, but that is your plan. You got to do things differently to get there. But for you, Mark, what's your view on Tottenham's overall season?
Yeah, it's been poor, very poor. But I think again that Tottenham have a few really big issues within the club, and you know when the Celtic manager's coming out saying that in his press conference before the cup final in Scotland, saying that Tottenham have been linked with loads of managers, so the interest doesn't register with me. That's quite a worrying place to be when the Celtic manager's snubbing you because he can't take the rumors seriously. I think it strikes back to the time when they hired Nuno, and he was like their seventh choice manager because everybody else rejected them, and it has a very similar feel about it that all the managers that they want, whether it be Nagelsmann first or, Pochettino or Arne Slot, we're really starting to get down to the low barrels of what's left for Tottenham. So they may end up with Brendan Rodgers, which, he shows great character. So, what can you ask? You can't ask for much more than that, can you? With King Brendan, get sacked from Leicester, move to Tottenham. That does seem like the way forward, doesn't it? But yeah, I think ultimately Tottenham have big problems within the leadership structure because it's been shown that they're not good enough to take the club to where they need to go, and Tottenham needs some new footballing guys who understand what it is to take a club to the next level. And Tottenham are a perfect example of the club that have tried to push into that A level category club from a B level club and have done a relatively good job at sustaining it in terms of the nature of the direction they've gone. But what's been shown is that, even Tottenham, who, they have two or three maybe top level players, and you can say two in terms of like elite level. Harry Kane, one of the best strikers in world football. Sung Min on his day is maybe again one of the best midfielders in his position, in his style, and what he offers. He wasn't consistent last season, but the season before that, he was one of the best players in the Premier League. And Harry Kane has again had another phenomenal season, and Tottenham have finished eighth, ninth.
Yeah.
So it's worrying for Tottenham, and with Harry Kane going into the final year of his contract, there's a lot of talk on how they should handle that situation. And I'm of the belief that Tottenham should sell Harry Kane this summer and get as much money as they can for him, because there's going to be, whilst they think it's going to be a bad situation and they're not going to be able to replace him for the £80 million they get, it is probably true. They will not replace Harry Kane's goals for £80 million. But I'll tell you one thing for sure: in 1 year's time, they certainly won't replace Harry Kane's goals for £0. And the owners don't like to spend a lot of money. So if the owners are going to spend money, now is the summer to sell Harry Kane, give Tottenham an extra 50, 60 million budget out of your back pocket and say, you've got 150 million. Go and get this squad set up to rebuild moving forward without Harry Kane. And I think that's the way forward. I know Tottenham fans, and they're saying that they're settling in for what could be a very difficult couple of years. And it's hard to see it any other way with the likes of the other teams around them and competing for them top seven spots.
Yeah, that's the problem they face. I mean, they finished eighth this season, 60 points, 1 point ahead of Brentford, 1 point behind Aston Villa, who are in seventh. I mean, that is pretty and they were 11 points off the top four, 29 points off of first place. It's pretty dire reading, really. And for a club that are very ambitious, I know as an Arsenal fan, I like to laugh at Tottenham, but to be honest, it is a bit tragic now. So being serious, I think with the outlay they made of £60 million on Richarlison for a single league goal, just the one league goal this season, it's just not good enough. And I know there's many factors in the disruption. Antonio Conte kind of got to a point where he didn't want to be there anymore. I know that with Kane, he wanted to leave in the summer, the strips from the captaincy and all that kind of stuff. And it's like there's all that disruption, and yet what have you got to show for it this season? There's been no progress. Let me actually review their last 5 games in the league season. Liverpool beat them 4-3. They beat Crystal Palace 1-0. Lost 2-1 to Aston Villa. Then got thrashed 3-1 at home to Brentford. And then beat Leeds 4-1 on the last day. For you, Mark, as our final thing on Tottenham, who would you say would be the manager that they should really try and get and do all they can to bring in that can hopefully start a resurgence for the club?
Yeah, well, I think it's worrying when you look at the rumor mill of who's likely to become the next Tottenham manager, and Ange Postecoglou from Celtic is the overwhelming favorite, with Brendan Rodgers next on the list, and Julian Nagelsmann, who it seems like for whatever reason has broken down talks. Luis Enrique, who we heard there was some question marks around whether they was interested. He also is linked with the Napoli job after Spalletti has said that he's taking a year out of the game. Spalletti is next on that list, but Spalletti has said he's taking a year out after winning the league title with Napoli, so that won't happen, you wouldn't think. And that leaves the one who I think I would go for if I'm in Tottenham's spot, and that's Graham Potter. It was a bad spell at Chelsea, but when Potter was at Brighton, I think Tottenham would have snapped their hands off to have Potter as their manager. And given time, I think Potter is a good coach, and I think Tottenham would have to give him time. And I'm not saying that that's going to immediately take them right back to the top, or even right back to the top of where they were, before, in terms of like competing for top four and selling into a comfortable Champions League team. Partly because I think that there are question marks around Potter, his ability to manage big egos. Good news is if Kane goes, there's not really any big egos left in that Tottenham team to manage. But I think Potter really needs a job at a level that's higher than Brighton, which Tottenham technically would be, even though they didn't finish above Brighton this year. And then time to be able to prove that he's still got what it takes to establish a club over a long period of time, and he's still one of the next up and coming managers. Because that Chelsea decision has not only hindered him in reputation or in kind of like his potential to move upwards to the next level. It's brought real question marks around his decision making, his ability to lead big egos and big dressing rooms, and his actual ability. We question mark about his potential ability. Can he actually make it at the top level of this game? So there's big question marks there, but I think Tottenham could be a nice landing spot for both of them, in which they are both quite happy with the relationship that they have. Tottenham wouldn't feel like they're pushing above their weight, after Potter's failures at Chelsea. Potter wouldn't feel, like Tottenham are too low of a club or too small of a club for his expectations. And I think that could be a nice potential marriage. But as is always the case with Tottenham, they've got to get the deal over the line. And they never do. Like, we can go back to the history of Tottenham with everything. And, they could have had Jack Grealish for £25 million, but they only wanted to pay £23 million. So they didn't get Jack Grealish. Over £2 million. A man who, 2 years later moved to Man City for £100 million. Like,
Crazy.
so this is the thing with Tottenham. There's always a lot of talking. There's always a lot of, negotiating, but getting the deal across the line, getting the thing across the line, whether it be a trophy, whether it be a player, whether it be a manager, that's what Tottenham need to do. So Potter would be my number one candidate for them moving forward, but I wouldn't probably be writing them in as a top four, maybe even top six club next season.
There's also talk that Marco Silva might be on the list as an option. Would you one? Do you think that would be a good move for him? And two, if he was to take that job, where would you see them finishing with him as their manager?
See, I think you always have to ask the question: can we do better than we did this year? And I'm not sure that Marco Silva would, in any long term sense, be able to break the hold that is and the competition that is around that top sphere of clubs. I think he's a good manager. I think he's done a good job with Fulham. But to me, there's still question marks about his ability, to be able to do it at the top, not even top level, but B level for long enough and sustained enough, a sustained enough time. But if Tottenham are linked with Celtic manager, then Marco Silva wouldn't be a bad shout. I think that is the problem with where Tottenham are at and have gone for the their poor decision making hiring decision making in hiring has put them in an awkward position because they got Mourinho, they got Conte, two world class coaches that haven't worked out. And but then they've also in the middle of that had Nuno, and whoever comes next. It feels to me like there's a long way to go in the rebuilding process for Tottenham.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be something quite entertaining to watch and annoying for Tottenham fans because it's tough at the lane. But you haven't had a worse season of the teams we're going to cover on this week's podcast episode. We would love to talk through every single team in the league, but we ain't got the time or the patience. And frankly, some of the teams, well done. Wolves, you survived again, up to 13th. I think next season you'll be looking for a top 10 finish, and then pushing on from there. West Ham, I think around the same. You get 14th. I think again next season you're looking for getting a bit closer to that top 10 and looking up now because you're in a cup final. So next season I'd be saying you guys should be pushing for like 9th and 8th if we're going to track this progression on because you're in the Conference League. And from the previous season you did quite well to get to that place. But let's talk about Chelsea. Big money bag Chelsea. Obviously, our resident Chelsea expert, fan, aficionado is not here this week, so we can talk about them as much as we want, or as little as we want. And I have to say, it has been an absolute train wreck at Stamford Bridge this season. And if anything, but for the fact that what was his Thomas Tuchel got you those results early in the season. If it wasn't for him, you would have actually got relegated. And it's funny to say, but it's a statistical fact. Like if Thomas Tuchel was not your manager for the start of the season, if you just started with Potter there was how Potter's results went, then switches to Lampard and how his results went, you'd be in the Championship right now. And I think that says everything about Todd Bowley and the management of the whole management group. It's not just Todd Bowley, but he's the face that we all and a name we all hear and see. But it just says a lot about what they've done. He bought a club without a clue of how to really run it properly. You got rid of the people that were instrumental in late era Roman success, because I know there's a lot of question marks over Maria Gravascona and her transfer dealings and stuff, and people they bought in, but it worked more or less. They've had a few flops in Lukaku and numerous others. Kai Havertz, depending on how you want to judge him, but he has been a flop, based on the outlay and what he's done. Shocking season. 12th place, 44 points for a team that were expecting to challenge for the title. Unacceptable. We could go on and on and on and on and on, but I think what I will want to ask you, Mark, because we are going to talk about our players of the season, best signing, worst signing, all that kind of stuff. We're going to get into that in a little bit, just very shortly. But for you, looking at Chelsea's squad, looking at all the promise they had in the beginning of the season, and how it's all panned out, who would you say has been their best player this season? I think I could say their worst, and I think there'll be a lot more candidates for that. But in all honesty, who has actually been Chelsea's best player this season?
Yeah, it's a hard question, isn't it? I think, when we look at the list of questions we're going to be asking ourselves, one of the questions is biggest disappointment club. And I think we can all, agree that Chelsea take that title and can lift that trophy, ahead of any other team by a country mile. And then you maybe have Leicester, who, probably didn't expect to get relegated. He was being Chelsea's best player. Kepa, um, plausibly had a period where he he was making lots of saves, and Chelsea probably would have lost, a handful more points if it wasn't for the fact that, against Aston Villa, he made 9 saves, and, Chelsea won 2-1, for example, like, in games like that. They could have been a lot lower, let alone, forget about Audi TT, but just, keeping the ball out of the net in a few games. I think Chelsea would have lost a handful more points than they did this season. Mateo Kovacic is linked with Man City.
Yep.
Must be doing something. Must be doing something right. I think he's a talented midfielder. But has not stood out in a Chelsea team in which has been so poor. Um, I think has been some players that have been absolutely horrendous. And I also think there have been some big misses, like Reece James. I think has been a big miss with these injuries for a lot of the season. I think Ben Chilwell has been a big miss
Yep.
with these injuries, and I think them two fullbacks are key to Chelsea's fluidity and their play. I think Sterling has been poor, considering the expectations and what you would hope for someone of his quality when he's played. But then a lot of it is the chopping and changing of that front three with about 9 players that could fit the position. I'm still baffled that Ziyech ever got a game in the second half of the season after leaving to PSG, and they clearly wanting rid of him, but playing a player that has got no future at the club. Just to appease him because he didn't get his move. It doesn't make any sense. That they are a mess. But I think under Pochettino, with another £200 million illegally spent, and some consistency of style of football, they should be on the hunt to be moving back up the league. A good 11th or 10th place finish next year.
Yeah, I think for me, Kepa definitely would be the one. I'd say it was probably their best player this season on the whole. I want to say Thiago Silva, but they shipped too many goals for me, and as good as and reliable as he is, I don't think this has been his best year. But then I don't blame him. Like, he's been surrounded by bozos. It's a complete
Also injured
mess
as
at the
well.
back,
For
and injured. Yeah,
Also injured as well. Yeah.
so it just hasn't really worked out for him. The last team, obviously, we can talk about our respective teams. And you've already expressed your kind of thoughts on Liverpool season not being kind of like going to plan. I guess I touched on a little bit for Arsenal. I think it has been a good year on the balance of things. The ending is not what from the position Arsenal were in, and from how I was talking very confidently in December, and I'll own it over my chest. I felt like from where we were, it was a strong enough position to be able to see it over the line with the right momentum, the additions and stuff. No one could have foreseen Saliba's injury. No one could have seen, well, not no one, but Saliba's injury compounded by Arteta's stubbornness to try something different, compounded by Thomas Partey's form falling off a cliff, compounded by Saka, having a couple of games where the shot selection and choices wasn't quite right, compounded by Jesus not finding his scoring feet. There was a section where there's too many things went wrong concurrently. It's like one of them you can mitigate. Saliba's injury happening, that's fine. Ben White's just back in, Tomiyasu there. Both of them getting injured in the exact same game. That was catastrophic. And we didn't have a plan B. And the sad thing is when we tried plan B, and looking at the system that Arteta played to end the season with, Partey inverting at right back rather than Zinchenko at left back, Kivior playing left back, Ben White and Ben White and Gabriel centre back pairing again, and then having Jorginho, so you have more of a tempo controller in the middle. It worked. And it was just a shame that he didn't try that a bit sooner. And I'm really hoping that now going into next season, he's learnt the lessons and the disappointment of, how this has went. Saka signed a new contract. Ramsdale signed a new contract. Erdegaard's one is in the works. Saliba's one is a bit complicated because at the end of the day, to call a spade, we messed him around for 2 seasons. We brought him in, highly talented youngster. We should have been very upfront with him to say, look, we want to loan you out for that season. Took a while to get him out on loan. The second season, in fact, I think we kept him for 6 months, then loaned him out. The second season, we just kind of fobbed him around a bit, played him in the under-23s, didn't think he was good enough already. And then it took a while for him to get out on loan, and then we just messed him around for too long. And then now when he's come back in, he's shown us that he's arguably our best or second best defender, depending on how you view Gabriel. I think Gabriel's been super consistent and throughout the whole year. So, they formed a rock-solid partnership. And then now, he has a back issue, which they're hoping will get resolved normally and properly and fine. But, his people want the right money because he's shown in his absence, our team collapsed. So you can't offer him money that's a bit more than what Reece Nelson's going to get on his new contract. When you look at what Saka's getting, when you look at what Nketiah got, when you look at what people like Ben White and Gabriel Jesus are earning, he's going to want to get numbers close to those guys. And rightfully so. The annoying thing is because of his age, it's like it's a lot of money now. The next contract's gonna be a problem. But the guy loves Arsenal. But at the end of the day, we still didn't do the right thing with him. We should have been a lot more upfront, a lot more clear. There was too many scenarios throughout the last, in his time at Arsenal or as an Arsenal player, he didn't handle it right. When he had a chance to go back and play for Saint Etienne in the cup final, we said no, we should let him play. No reason not to let him play, considering we didn't even use him in that season anyway. So what was our justification to not let him play? And all these little things, it adds up. And his representatives are not stupid. They'll sit back and say, you know what? I know you love Arsenal, but you're one of the best young defenders in the world. You should be starting for France, but that's a different issue altogether. But you're one of the best young defenders in the world. Everyone's going to want you. I know you love Arsenal, but we're going to get you the right deal for you. Even if that means leaving, but we're going to get the right deal for you. So, and fair play to him. So I'd have an issue with that. And that, as we all know, as we said before, when it comes to the striking department, Gabriel Jesus next season, I want 20 goals as a minimum. In the Premier League, in fact, I'll say this. I want 20 in the league. Because, if we are going to push Man City again, and if we're going to actually go all the way next season, and it's going to be an ask, but we've shown that we're capable. If we're going to do that, you're going to need to step up too. Because Gabriel Martinelli and Saka did their job. Odegaard did their job. Now, I know for those three, there's games when they could have done more. That's fine. But they did their job on the whole. You didn't finish your dinner enough. So we need more from you. Nketiah, same again. We need more from you too. You should be looking at 12 to 15 league goals next season, even as a rotational player. We need more. So that's my thing on Arsenal. But let's talk about the team that are in the cup final as of recording against their big rivals, or as I'll now refer to them, the team that might make them their little brother, Manchester United, who are might be sunned by Man City. You never know. They might turn around and get the points or get the result to win the cup and stop the treble. But I feel like it's like Thanos. It feels inevitable. And I feel for you Man United fans, especially the younger ones. The older ones in particular, I feel for you guys too, because it's Ferguson's legacy, as strong as it is. It's looking a bit shaky now. It's not looking a bit shaky. But for you, Mark, when you look at Manchester United and all the talk pre-season, all the we're going to challenge for the title, all this sort of stuff, they finished 14 points behind Manchester City in first. How do you feel like they might feel, and how would you look on their season?
I think it's a good season for Man United. They're back in the top four. They're back in Champions League. They won the League Cup. I think for Ten Hag's first season in charge, you can see what he's trying to do. You can see the direction that the club's moving in. It's positive. Their big players are actually stepping up and making a difference. Casemiro, I think, has been exceptional. Rashford had a great second half of the season. Anthony has even picked up a little bit in the last, period of the season, and Sancho coming back as well. I think for me, there's a lot of quality in that Man United team, and if Man United finish the season with third place and the League Cup in Ten Hag's first season, I think they can be very happy with that. I think. And the expectation and the hype around Man United is that they're always only ever 2 or 3 players away from, being back to where they want to be, and then they sign them 2 or 3 players, and they're still only 2 or 3 players away from being where they're where they want to be. And I think Man United fans need to realize that they're not in the Fergie era anymore. The Fergie era is done and dusted. Man United are not guaranteed, a top place. Man United are not guaranteed, to not finish below third for 26 years. Like that, that's not the footballing, world we live in anymore. And I think, the season is a good one. If they win the FA Cup, it'll be a very good first season for Ten Hag. So yeah, and they'll have money and they'll spend money, and they need a striker, a certain Harry Kane, if they could pull that one off. But they do need someone to put the ball in the net. If you added, the 28 league goals that Harry Kane got to Man United squad, they would absolutely be competing for a title. And I think that's the steps that Man United need to take. That's the direction that they need to go in, get an out and out striker. But then you look at that Man United squad, and it's a very good squad. You maybe get another centre back, another maybe younger midfielder, and they're in a situation where I think they'll always be there or thereabouts as a team that competes for the top four. I don't know if they'll compete for a title. It's always hard to say. But I think if I was a Man United fan, I'd be quite happy with where things are.
Yeah, I think they've had an okay season. I'll ask you this though: who do you think's had a better season, Arsenal or Manchester United?
I think Arsenal. I think Arsenal based on expectations, and based on where they both started the season. Man United. Where did Man United finish last season? Fifth.
Let me have a quick look. Sixth behind Arsenal in fifth.
Sixth. Okay, so Man United finished sixth, Arsenal finished fifth. Yeah, so they were both in similar spots. But Arsenal have put together a bona fide title campaigning season. They were top of the league, as we said, for the most time in the history of a team who's not won the title. I think that Man United fans will argue, well, we won a trophy, and we only finished a place behind you, and it is true. But I think all in all, Arsenal's overall season of progress is significantly better than Man United's, and the League Cup doesn't do enough, I think, to sway that. Now, I think I think if Man U are saying third, League Cup, FA Cup versus just second, then there's a case for the fact that Man United would have had a better season. But I think that's the nature of this situation. The Arsenal have fundamentally, they're in a better position. They've had a much more successful campaign in terms of overall, and they probably feel better positioned than United for moving forward. But I think that all in all, that is the problem. The second doesn't get you a trophy, and knocked out of the Europa League early enough, didn't win the FA Cup, didn't win the League Cup. So it's a good season, but it's a trophyless season.
Yeah, I agree. I think if they made it a domestic double, that would kind of sway things more in their favour. Right, let's get on to the top hot topics that we set out for beginning of the year. So we're going to start off at the bottom of the list and work our way up. So, biggest disappointment as a manager. My vote is very straightforward, very simple. Frank Lampard. That's it.
I'm not even going to say anything on the matter. It's just done and dusted. Big Frank. Yeah, that's a fair shout. I think I've gone for two. Just because I think for me both of their seasons was about as bad as each other. And that is Brendan Rodgers, who I think has had a shocking season and laid the foundations for Leicester's relegation. And Steven Gerrard, who I think has really disappointed and shown that he's not been good enough to move things on to that top level after what was a good spell at Rangers. So they're my two.
Yeah, I completely forgot Gerrard started the season as Aston Villa manager. Considering what they've done under Unai Emery, he just kind of swept it under the carpet, and it makes you think if Emery had gone to Newcastle when they were looking for him, how much further along would they be now? Not to even dismiss what Eddie Howe's done, 'cause he's done a great job, but it does make you wonder. And maybe Newcastle fans in the back of their head might think, "Oh, I wonder what Unai would have done with us." Biggest disappointment as a player.
I have two again.
Mm-hmm.
So number one is Jamie Vardy, who I think, Leicester should not be a team that get relegated with the quality that they have. They have, they're going to get picked off now in terms of, they have 5, 6, 7 players that are good enough for the Premier League. Like Vardy, his season has been so poor. He got 3 goals and 4 assists in 37 games. If Vardy scores goals, Leicester stay in the Premier League. And Vardy, I think, has been a big disappointment in that regard. But Harvey Barnes, James Maddison, Yuri Tielemans, Sinuku, Ricardo Pereira, then I'm probably missing even one or two, and Wilfred Ndidi, that are good enough to be playing Premier League football. So they really shouldn't be a team that gets relegated. And in all honesty, I think, you know, if you ask the question, if Everton get relegated and if Leicester get relegated, who have the more Premier League ready amounts of players? I'm saying Leicester.
Yeah, I agree on that as well. I think for me, my biggest disappointment player wise of the season, gosh, it's a tough one, because there's lots of players that have just. I mean, it's easy to pick at Chelsea players. It's so easy. But
Well, that's where my second one came from, Koulibaly. I think
yeah,
for the expectation, he's been quite poor.
I'm going to go for Richarlison. £60 million outlay as a striker. You should be doing more than one goal this season. It's just not good enough. It's just not good enough. It's just not good enough. So that's mine. Not good enough at all. Biggest disappointment as a club? Well, I'm just going to state the obvious. It is obviously Chelsea. I don't know how you can go from, and let's just look at this Premier League table. So let's drop back down to 2019-20. You finished fourth, 2020-2021, fourth again, so consistency. 2021-2022, third, and not to forget this season, scrolling 12th. How have you gone from third to 12th? Embarrassing. So they're my worst one.
Yeah, there's no argument there.
Worst signing of the season.
Yeah, you see, this is where I went Richarlison, because £60 million, one goal, three assists in 27 games, and any excuse to hate on Richarlison, I'll take. So yes, screw you, Richarlison. Can't stand you. Glad you celebrated your equaliser that wasn't an equaliser and got a yellow card for taking your shirt off. I'd lost a game and had to walk off in disappointment. Um, I just can't stand Richarlison. Most Liverpool fans will feel the same way. He took to Everton and, became a big, Everton fan who took digs and then left Everton in the lurch to move to Tottenham. And I'm just not a fan of Richarlison at all. I think he's the worst signing of the season. And then anyone that Chelsea signed. So, you've got Fofana, you've got Mudryk. I think they also are worthy of a shout.
I've got two this time around. The first one, I'm going to same as you, Wesley Fofana. I would say Richarlison, but I just think he's been the biggest disappointment.
The
He's
worst
also
player.
worst signing, but the worst players, all of those. But yeah, Wesley Fofana, I think for what Chelsea would have hoped for from a centre back, young centre back, promising talent, has not delivered in any way, shape, or form. The other player is a striker for West Ham, Gianluca Scamacca. Considering what West Ham did last season in finishing in the Europa, getting to the Europa League. Semi-finals, I think they got to in the end. They got knocked out. They were hoping to kick on big this season, and unfortunately for him, he just has not adapted to the style of football, and he's just not really done enough. I know he's had injury issues as well, but when he's played, he's just not really looked like he's just not looked it. So he's the one I'd say for my worst signing. Who's your shout for best signing this season?
Best signing. You see, this game is a game in which is pointless when you have Erling Haaland as an option in almost every capacity. So I'm gonna go Erling Haaland, of course. And then, if not Erling Haaland, which I think is the case for pretty much every category that we're going to address, Erling Haaland. But if not Erling Haaland, dot, dot, dot. So, yes, Haaland, best signing. But if not Erling Haaland, I say Casemiro. At United, I think, has been exceptional. I think he's had a great season. I think he has shown his leadership, his winning mentality. He's culture from Madrid over the years and has brought that to United, and you've seen that, and he's came up with a handful of big goals for United when they've needed them to get in the Champions League. First goal against Chelsea, big goals in big games. Scored the equaliser against Chelsea late at Stamford Bridge, or winner, sorry, late at Stamford Bridge. And I think Casemiro has came big for United in big moments, but that everyone said United need that defensive midfielder, and I actually think what they valued from more is not necessarily that defensive midfielder, but that leadership, that ability to bring a winning mentality to the club, that ability to pick the pitch up and move it forward. From years of winning, 5 Champions Leagues and all the trophies that he's won. So Casemiro for me, and then just a small shout out, because I don't think I would put him right at the top of this category, but just a small shout out to Cody Gapco in what has been a poor Liverpool season, I think he has been a bright spark, and has had a very good start to his Liverpool career.
Yeah, I think that those are two good shouts. I think Casemiro definitely has been quite an interesting one. Definitely a player that I think's done really well. I think the player that I want to go for is actually for a team near the bottom of the table, because I think there was a lot of talk around this signing when it happened because of the amount of money the club paid for him. There's a lot of talk as to why his previous club let him go. And my shout is Morgan Gibbs-White at Nottingham Forest. I just think he's just been so monumental in what they've done this season. There's so many games this year where he's just constantly trying to make things happen. I mean, watch him play; he's always trying to move it forward. And that's one thing with footballers. I always like players like to move the ball forward, because that's where the danger is. It's not going back. And he's always a threat. He's always trying things. And I know in the game when Arsenal played them, he was just an absolute menace, man. He just peed me off, man. I was just getting annoyed. I was like, I rate him, but can you just allow it, man? Like, just have an off day for once, crying out loud. But yeah, he's one that I think definitely next season will raise his profile, and then the season after, it's likely that he will be getting those offers from the tubs at the top 8 clubs will start looking at him as a potential viable option, because he's English. Obviously, the rules changing this summer. It's going to mean that the premium for English players is going to go up again, as it has always is. English tax goes up even higher every time. But I think he will definitely be one that clubs will look at and think there's a player there. Especially teams that play like a 4-3-3 system, or at least play a 3 in midfield. He's a guy you might think, okay, we can stick him in there, or you might play him off one of the wings. So he's one that I'll even go as far as say this. I think he's going to have a James Maddison like trajectory, in that he's going to be on everyone's lips by the middle of next season. Everyone's going to be talking about Morgan Gibbs-White in the same way they talked about Maddison when he went from Norwich to Leicester. It's going to be a similar sort of trajectory. Then he will get that move. So he's the one I'm backing a lot as my signing of the season. Well, as with all signings, we've said the best, said the worst. Next up on our category is the player of the year. And I feel like that might also be the same player who made the best signing, Mr. Erling Haaland. Obviously, it's like, how can it not be him? Sadly, Harry Kane's had a great season, but no one cares because Erling Haaland exists. Martin Odegaard's had a really good season for Arsenal. No one cares because Erling Haaland is here. So Haaland is my pick.
Yep, Erling Haaland. But if not Erling Haaland, dot dot dot. So yeah, no, Erling Haaland has been exceptional, and to be fair, he deserves raving about, breaking Premier League record, scoring a bunch of goals, leading Man City's front line. He's strong, he's fast, he's aggressive. I will also say this on Erling Haaland, because it's always nice to know that I was right. But Erling Haaland was at Salzburg, and Kylian Mbappe was at PSG. I think he'd moved just to PSG from his season at Monaco. And I was having a debate with someone who was calling me insane for saying that Erling Haaland will be a better player than Kylian Mbappe. Kylian Mbappe had won the World Cup. Kylian Mbappe had had that run where he scored in the Champions League quarters, last 16 quarters and semis for Monaco, and then had got a £160 million move to PSG, and Erling Haaland was at Salzburg about to move to Borussia Dortmund, and I was saying, look, at the end of the day, for me, Haaland has got all of the attributes that Mbappe doesn't have in terms of to be an out and out striker. And the thing about Haaland is his game will not change. So even if he loses a bit of his pace, he'll become like Lewandowski. Whereas Mbappe is going to have to completely change his game. And can he do it? Yes, he's a brilliant player. They are the new Messi and Ronaldo. But for me, just as Messi is eclipsed Ronaldo, I think Haaland will eclipse Mbappe. And after a long debate, and at the point there was a point middle of the season where my boss, who overheard a lot of them conversations and them debates, sent me a text saying, I didn't even know who Erling Haaland was at the time you was having that debate, and now he just came and broken Premier League records. Like, so Erling Haaland has been magnificent. He is the player of the year. He is exceptional. He is the next level, best player in the world. He's currently the highest valued player in world football, and Two other players that I'll give a shout to. You've already mentioned Odegaard and Kane, who have had great seasons. For me, Kieran Trippier has been brilliant at Newcastle, and obviously, would have needed, Haaland, Kane, and Odegaard to have poor seasons to probably win the Player of the Year. But I think a big shout out to an incredible season and a player who I will begrudgingly give credit for because, again, I'm not his biggest fan, but he is absolutely exceptional and very key in that Man City team is Rodri. Best
Oh,
defensive midfielder in the Premier League by a mile. Plays a brilliant, brilliant style of football. He's clearly spent a lot of time with Fernandinho, learning how to make 10 tackles before getting a yellow card, and never getting sent off. But he is instrumental in that Man City team. And outside of Haaland, who is exceptional, and obviously Man City proved they could win a title without a striker last year. They also lost the Champions League final when Rodri was taken out of that team, and they didn't play a defensive midfielder. And I think Rodri is the essential linchpin to that Man City midfield. And I hope Pep makes the same mistake again. He won't, but I would like him to in the Champions League final against Inter Milan. Forza Inter.
yeah, we're all hoping that Galaxy Brain Pep reemerges because if not, like I said, they're tracking for a historic treble. Right, Club of the Year. Which club has been the best performing club or the best club in the Premier League this season?
Manager of the year first, no?
Nah, I want to end the manager of the year. I want to end the manager of the year because that's a funny one.
Well, I think, I think for me, one informs the other, and I think we'll be in for quite an interesting discussion and debate around this. I've gone for Aston Villa,
Ooh, wow. Outside of
and I
my own team,
assume
I've got, yeah.
I'm going to say I assume that the club that you will have gone for would be a club in which is the perfect kind of level debate here.
Well, outside of my own, the team I was looking at was Brighton.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah,
I had Newcastle as a potential, but then the way how they fell apart, they finished fourth. If they'd finished third, I would say Newcastle comfortably, but they had third spot and they lost it. You can't lose that to Manchester United. I'm sorry, not acceptable. And you almost lost fourth altogether. So no, not them.
yeah. So look, I think from my perspective, Aston Villa under Gerrard, I think people forget that Gerrard was even the Aston Villa manager this season, and they were looking like they were going to get relegated. They was just outside the relegation zone when Unai Emery took over. It was a fight between which English, central midfielder legend could do the worst at the start of the season. And yeah, like Gerrard did an awful job at Villa to the point in which we almost wondered whether Villa was really going to be good enough to even stay in the Premier League, let alone be, competing for Europe this season. And Gerrard left. Villa really hit above their standards with Unai Emery, who I think is an absolutely exceptional coach. I think tactically he is an exceptional coach, and I think it didn't work out at Arsenal for a handful of reasons. He wasn't the candidate that Arsenal wanted, therefore I think that was problematic. And there was question marks off the back of his time at PSG. But I think Unai Emery tactically is just phenomenal. And what he's done since coming to Aston Villa, he's taken them from 17th to 7th. And over the year, over the 20 since January, Aston Villa only have a worse record in the Premier League to Man City. So they're the second best team performing wise from January to now. And they finished only 1 point behind Brighton. Whilst Brighton have been raved about, I'm not underestimating Brighton's season. I think Brighton have had a great, very good season. But I think for Aston Villa to only finish 1 point behind them, they did the double over them, Brighton, this season, and was having to deal with Gerrard tax because they were 17th. After 10, 15 games of the season. To get Europa Conference League is phenomenal. First time Aston Villa have been in European football for a handful of years, and it's an exciting time for Aston Villa. They're linked with big name players like Marco Asensio, and also their centre back that they signed from Sevilla, who spent the season injured with ligament injuries. Will be back for next season, which will be like a new signing too. So I think for me. when I consider Aston Villa and Brighton's season, I feel like Aston Villa's season is that bit more impressive. And I think with Unai Emery at the helm, I would say that Aston Villa are a better position to finish in the top six than Tottenham next year.
Wow.
I think that's where it's at. That Unai Emery would be a great coach for Tottenham, but they wouldn't be able to attract him, right? Like, that is the reality of the situation currently, and I think for me, I'm very impressed by that, and I feel like Villa could do a very similar trajectory to West Ham, which is even if they do fall off a little bit this season, they're more than capable of winning the Europa Conference League, and the winners of the Europa Conference League get a place in the Europa League. So in that regard, like West Ham, for example, who haven't had the best season in the league, are still only 90 minutes away from Europa League football. And I think Aston Villa are on a really good trajectory. We know what Unai Emery is like once he gets into the Europa League. That trophy's his.
True.
Like, it's game over. Like, so once he gets Aston Villa there, like, game over. So for me, I think I'd give Aston Villa Club of the Year over Brighton just about.
No, I mean those are really great reasons, and I think for me with Brighton, what I've really been impressed with is how De Zerbi's come in and just not so much continued Potter's work, but elevated it. And even the players that they brought, I mean, even the player I didn't mention was Enciso, who could be up there as a shout for signing of the year. What a player. Even like Craig was saying the other day, that, I would love my arse. I'm like, nah, let him stay where he is. Like, he needs to cook a few more years first. But what a player. Like, even the way he strikes his football is amazing. Like, they've just been so good. And, we expect them to have more turnover this summer with Caicedo and McAllister likely to leave, but they've already got their replacements lined up. And that's the thing I like the most about Brighton is that no matter what, whether it be players or managers, you can leave through the door and we're not going to miss you because the person coming in to replace you is as good, if not better, than you. And it makes other clubs think, well, Chelsea have nabbed their whole scouting network, and yet they couldn't even pull off one good signing. Chelsea have had zero good signings. Like, how embarrassing. You took all of Brighton's scouts. You took their head of recruitment. You took their data analyst guy. And yet you still couldn't sign one good player for this year. Now, obviously, in seasons going on, we might see. I think Noni Madukele might look at me and say, bro, I think I'm Chelsea's best signing this season. And I would say, fair enough. I think you probably are on the balance of things. But even then, that's like, okay, you're their best
Clutching.
signing, but you still got an F. Like, you got an F. So, or I could call it an E minus, but you got an E minus. Well done, you're their best signing. But this is a club that's used to having A stars or A plus plus pluses. You're an E minus or an F. So, okay, well done. Everyone else is a U, but you're an F. So, yeah, I think for Brighton, that's the thing I've been really impressed with. How they've been able to go toe-to-toe with the best teams. The game they gave Man City, the game they gave all of us. They're the one team that you think, oh, they're just known as the Giant Killers now. And it's not like you watch their games, you don't ever feel like they're clutching at straws or they're really struggling. They go in these matches and they actually put up a proper fight.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, they're a fantastic football club, well run, well owned. Made good decisions, get good replacements in, and they're a club that are an example of a club that could afford to lose two of their best players and still, be in with a really good shout of challenging and competing for that top eight again next year. And you look at the players, the list is endless. Like, they're probably going to lose Caicedo and McAllister this summer. Caicedo probably to Chelsea. And McAllister to Liverpool. But they still have um, four other players that I can think of off the top of my head that I'm like, yeah, these guys are going to the top of the game. Matoma is such a talent and a fantastic player. I think Brighton will give him another year and then he'll be their player that will go next summer. But then, like you said, Enciso has came on the scene and been brilliant in this last 8 or 9 games of the year, and he'll be another one that will be moving for Brighton. I think Evan Ferguson looks really good, as a centre forward too, and a very traditional centre forward, which I think is really good to see, and I've been impressed by him. And then Estupinan at fullback has been fantastic as well going forward, and defensively, and is a very, very good, astute left back who, when you think Cucurella was the player that was in that position for Brighton before, and they sold him for a lot of money and replaced him with Estupinan, and it doesn't look like there's any difference. You just don't worry about Brighton's ability to replace players. And De Zerbi obviously is a very good coach and highly rated. Models his game from Pep's style of football, would see himself as a Pep disciple, and the future looks bright for Brighton again. De Zerbi, another manager who's linked with Spurs. Why would he go there? Why would you leave Brighton for Spurs at the moment? Like, it doesn't make any sense. It'd just be adding more pressure when you've got more likely chance of finishing in the top eight with Brighton, where there's no pressure, than you do Spurs. So yeah, I think looking at that situation, Brighton are in a really good spot.
Yeah, I agree. Right, on to the award which the official league gave it to the man who led his team to another Premier League title, even though we all know that due to the charges against his club, they probably should even be in a contention for said Premier League title. But well done, Guardiola. I hope you're proud of yourself. I hope you enjoy your sleeps at night. And I hope your club realise that you too want a swift resolution to this issue, although you conveniently only said so after the league was wrapped up and not in the weeks and months beforehand when it would have been important and useful. Because now, if we change things, it's a bit harder to take that trophy away from you than it is to cut you off points during the season. Anyway, but who's your shout for manager of the year?
Yeah, one thing I will say on Pep, before I get to my manager of the year, is that Pep has changed English football. He is exceptional to have won, 5 of 7 Premier League titles with Man City. He is on, a higher trajectory than Ferguson based on that standard. And I actually think if Pep stayed in England for the next 15 years, would win more trophies, Premier League trophies, than Ferguson. So the quicker he decides to retire, move on, manage an international club, go try his hand in Italy. You know what? There's teams in Serbia that attack him. Like, just get out of my league. Like, the fact that every other rival team is like, okay, you proved your point. We're fed up of you. Go away. Shows that Pep is the, in my opinion, greatest manager of all time, but certainly has changed English football in a way that Ferguson never did, that maybe only remotely Wenger could have been considered to have done. Is high praise for Pep Guardiola. And I don't know if we'll get to it before the end of the podcast, but obviously Jose lost the Europa League final there, and talking about where he fits in the bill of all-time greatest managers, I think Pep is number one. And congratulations on another Premier League title. My manager of the year reflects my team of the year. So Unai Emery, I think, is the manager of the year. I think his success at Villa has been phenomenal. He took a team from 17th to 7th to European football. Has a record in which is exceptional. Like I say, only Man City have a better record in the time that he's been here. And Villa aren't necessarily a club that you would have looked at and thought would have been able to get in that top 7 if you'd have looked at the league table 10, 15 games in, especially even when Unai Emery took over. You'd think if he just kept them up, he'd be doing a good job here. Like, that's why Villa got rid of Gerrard, because they didn't want to be playing championship football next year. And like I say, his tactical, abilities are phenomenal. He was the first team to take points off Liverpool in their run in the end of the season that simply ended Liverpool's hopes for European football. And if it wasn't for Champions League football, and if it wasn't for Firmino's late goal, they'd have taken the 3 points. Played very, very well at Anfield. I think Unai Emery is a phenomenal coach, and I think that Unai Emery next season will build upon what he's done. And I think the point that you made about Unai Emery and Newcastle is the reason why Eddie Howe didn't get my manager of the year, and I went for Unai Emery, because I think that Newcastle have had a great season, and to get Champions League football is fantastic, but they had a period where they lost 5 or 6 games in a row, and then at the end of the season they really fell off. And and to be fair, only just about tumbled across the line, right? So I think I think Newcastle would have, again been top four, but maybe even maybe even could have been competing for a title or a lot closer to Arsenal. Under Unai Emery. Again, just an opinion and just perspective. He's not actually done it, so you don't know. But I think what he has done is exceptional, and therefore for me, he's my manager of the year.
Yeah, I think that's great reasons and a good shout. Like you, Guardiola is definitely the de facto one because whatever. Yeah, great legacy, great man. No question. Oh, yeah, great man. Depends who you are as a player. You might not agree with that. Um, yeah, I mean Eddie Howe. I like what Newcastle did, but like I said, the way how the season fell apart, I think it's a bit disappointing. The third place was theirs, and I think if they'd finished third, I would have been happy giving it to them. Similar sort of reasons of Arsenal. I think Arteta's had an amazing season with the club, and I think what Arsenal have done going from fifth to second, incredible. If I ignore the fact that we were first for a large chunk of the season, if it was just fifth to second, you're like, great. Well done. The objective was Champions League football. We've done it. We've more than exceeded that goal. We were so close to making, history, but we didn't. And that's the reason why he's not manager of the season for me. It's like you can't be that close and not get over the line. And a
It
lot of
is
it is down
funny.
to his decision making.
It is funny on that point with Arteta how if Arsenal had had a worse season, he could have got manager of the year, right? Like if Arsenal had have
I know.
just always been kind of, third and second, third and second, third and second, third and second, and then finished second, we'd have been like contender for manager of the year. But because Arsenal was having a better season and was top, 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 second, we're like, nah, you can't get it. It is interesting. There's an interesting kind of fallacy in our thinking there because theoretically his season has been even more impressive. The fact that Arsenal have been sat top of the league for so long, but I do still somewhat tend to agree with you that just the fall off and the missing out means that you just don't think you can give it to him, and I would agree with that, even though I would admit that the viewers could listen and see a fallacy in thinking there.
Yeah, and agreed. They could see a fallacy in it, but I think ultimately, if you think about like using Olympic sports as like a comparator, you think about a marathon. You have pace setters whose one job it is to just get everyone going, set the rhythm, and everyone follows it. And unfortunately for Arsenal, we were pace setters this season. We set the pace and rhythm for a long time, but when it comes to the business end of the season, that's what matters in football. When it comes to when you're coming up to award season, that's what matters. Everything leading up to that is preparing you for it. And that's one of the things I'll look back on Sir Alex Ferguson, and he was one of the masters at doing. He knew how to pace Manchester United throughout a season. It was very rare to find them top for the majority of a season. There was always a turning point in Jan, Feb, or March when that Man United team would click into gear and they would start to pull away, or they'll start to catch you up. And once they get in front of you or they're behind you, if they're a couple of points behind, you're in trouble. And then once they get a sniff and they're ahead of you, they're not dropping off that again. And that to me is, again, it's Premier League heritage. That's what defines this league. And I'm happy with what Arsenal have done. And I do think there's a lot of good arguments to say either way for Arteta, where he could have been in for a shout. Like, we've exceeded expectations by even finishing second. But at the end of the day, with football, results matter. With football, performances matter. And also with football, you've got to look at the pattern of a whole season. And if the season stopped in March, yeah, manager of the year, Arsenal win the Premier League. And I mean, to be fair, if the Premier League had done their job, he would probably still would be manager of the season, with Man City, and there's 115 charges, which I love to bring up. It's still not late, guys. Still time. Whenever you're ready, hopefully before 2025, a resolution would be nice. But ultimately, for me, especially with this season, with years going forward, that's what's held him back getting that top marker for this year. And it's a thing we've said in previous episodes, and it's a concern you had about Arteta, is whether he is the man to go that next level. And right now, I think he has done an incredible job at like Eddie Howe has at Newcastle. They've both done incredible jobs of getting their clubs to the precipice. We are both now at the door of the Champions table. We're at the door. Now, I'm not downplaying Arsenal's history. I'm not saying Arsenal are a small club, but let's just focus on current recent history and the teams that are really relevant that everyone cares about. Arsenal and Newcastle are at the door where you open the door and there's a seat at the big boys' table. There's a seat reserved for both of them. You know, if you're tracking it, there's already a seat in there for Arsenal. It's got a bit of dust on it now. I got to take the dust cover up. Arsenal seat is there. Newcastle's got a seat in there. Nottingham Forest has a seat in there. Aston Villa has a seat in there from history gone past. Like, people don't forget your legacy. Your seats are at the big boy table, but it's in the corner, covered with a dust sheet. Obviously, Tottenham, they had a chair in there, but it's so old they've had to like put it in the attic to kind of air it out. So it's going to take off and to get it back and put it in that room. But the point being is that, you know, there's a conversational point with the biggest teams where when it comes in year out, like for Dortmund, they fell short just at the final hurdle a few weekends ago for the title, right? But everyone knows when it comes to Germany, Bayern Munich are the guys. Dortmund want to be there, they got to work. So for me, for Arsenal and Arteta and Eddie Howe and Newcastle, Unai Emery is coming and already he's done what took you, both of you, a couple of seasons. He's done it in one. And I have to say that. He's done it in one. He's come in and he's got his team in European football in 1 year, right? Arteta took us away from European football for a couple of years. Fair play. So that's important. That's an important thing to say. So now the question is for next season, Newcastle, what do you do? Arsenal, where do you land? If Arsenal finish second again, fine. But that point gap better be 2 or 3. It can't be more than what it is right now, which is about 5 or 6, which is very sad when you think about it. But it could have been 8. So I'll take the 5 or 6 point gap. What I want to ask you as a final thing, just to wrap up, is your predictions for next season. What's your top 6 and what's your bottom 3? And it's very hard because no business has been done yet. We're just going off what we see. But and of course, Chelsea can't be as poor as they have been this year, next year. But if you could give a quick shout out to your top 6 and your bottom 3 going into 2023, 2024.
I'm going to delay you on that one by asking you to actually tell me who your manager of the year is, because you didn't say who your manager of the year was.
I didn't say. Oh. Yeah, give it Guardiola, man. I was thinking Roberto De Zerbi, but you know what? I've been worn down by what that man has done. What he's done. To be honest with, I mean, even with Man City this season, right? He reinvented their way of playing. Like they changed system mid-season on the fly when he switched to. You know what? He was. You know, they were trying to play the inverted fullback thing. They had Rico Lewis, and he looked quite good for a while. And then his form dropped off a cliff, and it's like, okay, well, no, they took him out of the team before his form really was detrimental. He was starting to play a bit shaky. Took him out of the team, didn't affect his confidence. He came back in last game of the season, looked fine, or last 3 games of the season. But then to do that to the back 4, to play 4 bloody centre-backs, and to be as solid as they have been. Nathan Ake, who, again, he's a player that could have been in a shout for player of the season because he's been monumental at the back. Akanji could have been in with a shout as one of the signings of the season because, again, he's also come in, played at Dortmund. They didn't really rate him that highly, but he came in, done a great job. That's 2 players comfortably have been up there. And then, you know, they were able to get it done. So for me, yeah, it's going to be Guardiola. He gets it for me.
Okay. Good stuff. Right, look, I am caveating this top 6 and bottom 3 with the fact that we will do this again on the podcast right before the season starts, after signings have been made, and then maybe again on the 1st of September when the deadline window closes. So, bottom 3. Luton, Sheffield United, Everton. That's my bottom 3.
Wow, Everton are finally going to drop out the league.
Yeah, I feel like they're kind of asking for it. Like, you know, there's only so long you can keep doing what you're doing. And I'm not sure that the significant changes will be made to get together there. So, okay, top 6 at this stage. Premier League champions, Man City. Second, Liverpool.
No.
3rd, Newcastle. 4th, Arsenal. 5th, Man United. 6th, Aston Villa.
Hey. All right. I'm going to do my bottom half. So I'm backing Wolves, Bournemouth, and Luton Town to get relegated. I think Luton Town will finish above those three. So they'll be like the last, as in they'll be like 18th. Wolves will be rock bottom and Bournemouth will be above them. So bottom three. And then my top six, I'm doing this based purely on heart, not really on logic. But we move because I can say what I like. I'm gonna go because I think the ban will come into effect for next season. I think Man City will get the punishment will kick in and they'll be fighting it. So I think it's going to affect them. So I'm going to go for Liverpool first, Arsenal second, Manchester United third, Newcastle fourth, Man City fifth, and Aston Villa sixth. Because I'm expecting them to get the ban for next season.
Oh, this is
That's why.
okay.
If the ban doesn't happen, okay, if there's no ban, I think Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool, what did I say? Man United, Newcastle.
Man City, you got
Villa.
Man City. Well, you put Liverpool first before.
First.
So,
If but if the ban doesn't happen, they'll win it again.
so you put Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal, United, top four.
Yeah. No, I put Arsenal and Liverpool. That doesn't make logical sense why the ban would. But yeah, that's how I did it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm backing you to win with the ban. I'm not backing you to be ahead of us without the ban. But yeah, that's what I'm seeing for next season. But we'll see what once the squads are cemented. And actually, I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to everyone's preseason matches to get a feel for how things are shaping up because I like how Arsenal ended the year. I liked some of the stuff we were trying. Didn't work in all the games, like against Forest didn't work. But I like the little tweaks that Arteta's trying to do. For you guys, Klopp's found his rhythm again. Who would have thought having players fit would have made such a big difference? But hey, it's not rocket science, is it? To the owners, you know what to do. As for Manchester United, there's work to be done. And like you said, that striker is vital. They need that striker to kind of push them over the edge. And I don't know if they will get it over the line. I know that Bayern Munich are talking about Harry Kane. I know that... there was obviously the Real Madrid news, but obviously Benzema's now staying. But they may want to bring Kane in a year early just to kind of shore things up over there anyway, because if Benzema was flirting with going to Saudi Arabia, he's now staying, he's got a new contract. But either way, that situation probably will run on again. So they might want to shore things up there. And then, of course, like other clubs might rival, a bid for Harry Kane. Chelsea might want to splash the cash. Man City might feel a bit greedy and thought, why not? They don't need him, but why not? Because we can afford him, why not? But yeah, we'll see how that goes. And then, like I said, with Villa, I want to see what they do next year with balancing out European football with the time managing the league schedule. And we'll see. But if it's going to be an exciting season, I'm expecting Arsenal to do quite well this year because we've had a taste of it now. We'll go, like with you guys on the Rodgers, there's something about having a taste of that top table thing. And then you get the right manager and he changes everything. So I feel like it could be something similar. But obviously, there's not a managerial change coming for Arsenal. So Arteta will have to learn more. But yeah.
Sounds good.
That's it for me for this episode.
Good stuff. Yeah. Well,
next week, we will start talking about some of our, individual favourite performances and favourite matches. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good. I think we're excited. I think there's going to be a lot of good preseason talk. We're discussing what's going to be going out on the podcast, and we'll do a dedicated Arsenal podcast, preseason Arsenal podcast, Liverpool podcast, Chelsea podcast. That's the teams that we support. There's some other great ideas in the works, so exciting times ahead.
Indeed. Well, thanks, guys, for listening. It's always a pleasure bringing you the podcast. We'll be back again next week with a nice little light one, and then we'll be gearing up for next week we'll probably preview the Champions League final. We'll probably talk about the FA Cup final as well. We'll talk about whoever wins that, and then we'll start gearing up for the Women's World Cup. We might do a little bit about that too, but mainly we're just looking forward to seeing how the football year evolves and what comes around the horizon.
Peace.